Think.
People are all optimized. That's all people can
All right. Good afternoon, and let's go ahead and get rolling. So I appreciate you all coming in. I know that the weather has been pretty dicey over the last few days. As I mentioned this morning for Canvas announcement, if you ever find yourself unable to safely get to class, let me know, and I'm happy to send you a Zoom link for attending that class meeting remotely. So glad to have you here. We'll go ahead and get rolling. Today is our last class discussing small group leadership before we move on. So we'll go over some key ideas, things to know there. We'll be doing an activity related to leadership as well to wrap up the week. Before we do that, I've received a couple questions regarding the small group observation assignment, just to help you with preparing and thinking about that one. The first is with regard to consent. So you don't necessarily need to include both verbal and written consent. Verbal is fine if it's coming from the leader of the group and they're comfortable with having you participate and attend. I think a good rule of thumb is to go based off of the comfort that people in the group have given, right? So if they're very open to the public, you're welcome to attend, to report on it. That's great. You don't necessarily have to go through a more extensive process, but some groups are going to be a little bit more concerned with security and privacy. So one thing that you can do is what's called a member check. And a member check is when you take the material that you're quoting or drawing from that group and you send along your draft to them so that they can confirm that what you're putting together is accurate and actually reflects what happened in the meeting. That's something we do a lot in qualitative research that makes sure that when we're interviewing or observing people that the information is accurate. Another thing that you could do if you want to is anonymize. So you could anonymize the names of the group members. You could give them a pseudonym or a different name that fills in for their names, or you could be vague about the details of the club or organization as a way of protecting the anonymity of people in the group. So my advice to you is just to respect whatever level of comfort they have with you reporting on them as a group and using that as the basis of working together in preparation for that assignment. Again, if you're running into any issues related to finding a group and finding a meeting to attend, let me know. As we're approaching the end of the month, I do encourage you to start to figure that out as soon as you can and use ideally next week as a way to lock in your meeting. I will be posting a Google form next week for you to fill out to indicate your availability, and then we'll be slotting in the presentation days with that in mind. So last class, we talked about leadership, including what situations give rise to a leader, right? Somebody might be appointed to be a leader, or they become an emergent leader where they're called upon to engage with a task or issue. We talked about some of the strategies for good and effective leadership and some of the skills that good leaders can practice, right? Some of the ideas that we discussed here are good leaders focusing on developing results, on collaborating, and in many ways on navigating the tightrope. On the one end, they don't want to completely take on everything for themselves and overstretch. If you're taking minutes, if you're organizing the meeting, you're also playing devil's advocate, right? If you're taking on all the roles all at once, you're not going to be able to do them effectively. But if you're delegating to everybody else, you're not doing any work yourself. That reflects poorly for other members of the group. So it's a way of finding a balance between your tasks and a deck leadership where you're involved in the process, but not overstretching yourself. Focusing on results, sharing the responsibilities, and collaborating with the group effectively are some of the things that we've talked about. And we also talked about the idea of building a successful team, right? Building a good team means that you're creating a good framework for the group. You're allowing people with expertise to be involved. And you're not micromanaging. You're allowing people to address conflicts themselves and only coming in to address them if they escalate. For today, we're going to be talking a fair bit about groupthink, some of the challenges that are related to actively participating and being involved in a group. That's a big issue and one of the biggest problems that can come up that can impact the success of the group. Then we'll be talking about some of the ways that we can build a strong team and different styles of leadership that can shape the ways that groups behave. So to get us started, right, we can think about the role of groupthink. So groupthink is one of the biggest issues that is impacting groups and organizations and leads to a whole variety of failures, challenges, and of problems that can make the groups unsuccessful and unable to achieve the things that they set out to achieve. So I always like to share this example. It's from a few years back, but we have Kendall Jenner here. How many people have seen or have heard about this ad, the Kendall Jenner Pepsi ad? Yes, a couple of you, right? So this was an advertisement that was developed by Pepsi, right, using the celebrity Kendall Jenner, and it came out when there was, not to say that there hasn't been for a longer period of time, but there was very much a breaking point regarding discussion about race, significant amount of protests, discussions, and issues surrounding the topic, right? And this ad came out in the context of those issues and was very, very, very widely criticized for its content and not being seen as particularly sensitive to the moment and the issues. What I think is interesting, right, is the fact that we made it all the way to this ad being aired, being broadcast, being circulated in a way that, you know, it was filmed, it was scripted, it went through organizations, it went through meetings, it went through so many hoops, and we got to this point. So I think it's an interesting example here of the idea of groupthink. So if you're ever looking to a solution with regard to issues of race, of police, of a variety of topics, apparently just give them a Pepsi. So, right, this was criticized because, yeah, these are important topics and issues, regardless of where you stand on issues of race, on issues of police and law enforcement, right? The concern was that this was really heavily trivialized, right? Like, it's portrayed as a party, it's portrayed as giving a Pepsi to a police officer that makes everybody happy and get along, hooray, we're cheering, we did it. This is an example of the problem of groupthink. That there's a tendency of a lot of groups, of organizations, to accept the group's ideas despite the concerns that individuals might have in a group, right? So another way of thinking about this is kind of like lemmings off a cliff, right? You might be familiar with the phrase, the lemmings, right? Little creatures are jumping off of the cliff. Members of a group might be doing a bad decision, and you see that other people are doing that, so you do it too. You might have reservations or concerns, right? But in an effort to follow along with the group or a belief that the group is doing things right, you choose to take on the group's position on the topic, right? So the big element here to know with regard to groupthink is the idea of self-censorship. In other words, we might have concerns. We might have looked at this ad in like a board meeting and said, wait, hang on, this doesn't seem like a good idea right now. This could give us some bad press, right? But the decision to move ahead on an issue and to not fully address a concern that's come up is groupthink in practice, right? You have concerns, you have thoughts, but you choose not to share them to the group, perhaps because the group is unwilling to take on opposing perspectives. You don't want to hurt your image, or you might have doubt as to whether or not your concerns are really justified. In other words, groupthink brings out an idea of what's known as an illusion of invulnerability. In other words, you might really think that you have a really good group. You're a good team, you work well to study for assignments, you're part of a good club or organization, right? There's no way that this can happen to you. But that's one of the biggest traps, right? Groupthink brings an illusion of invulnerability. We think that our group is immune to these problems. We tend to judge our group a lot more highly even if it's falling into traps of its behavior, of its practices that actually can hurt the productivity and ability of the group to make decisions. So there are a few different things that we can do in order to deal with groupthink as it comes up in our small groups, right? And one of the biggest roles that a group leader can have is to create an environment that combats groupthink. Because if we're a member in a group, yes, we can express our views, we can share our concerns, but it's on the leader to create an environment that allows those concerns to be heard effectively. One of the best ways that you can do this is by having somebody who plays devil's advocate, right? So I don't necessarily mean this in the obnoxious comments on YouTube, comments on the internet kind of way, right? Where somebody is just like arguing for the sake of arguing. Instead, playing devil's advocate is somebody who is taking on an opposing perspective and really trying to present a developed argument against that point. And that serves a couple functions, right? First of all, it allows the people in the group to have a reasoned justification for why they're doing what they're doing. And second of all, it allows them to rethink and perhaps do something differently if the other opposing view brings up a good point. For example, maybe every year you have a booth for your club at Spring Symposium, and somebody brings up the idea of not doing one for the year. And perhaps they bring up an argument about how that would save your group money and time, and they could focus on that budget elsewhere. That might be a way that your group plays devil's advocate and comes to a good conclusion. So it can be useful. In fact, right, a lot of people who are running for public office, for example, running for president, governor, senator, etc., they will oftentimes have like a debate or sparring partner who's supposed to represent the other side. And that person will do a lot of opposition research to try to present the most developed perspective of the other side that they can. One of the challenges that you can run into with playing devil's advocate is what's known as the straw person fallacy, right? This is the idea that you're presenting an opposing perspective in as sympathetic for you of a light as possible, right? Where you say a bunch of flimsy, unsupported arguments that are supposed to represent the other side. So one of the challenges is that you don't want a devil's advocate to just present bad arguments. You want the devil's advocate to really try to develop their points and provide as best of a case as they can. Otherwise, haha, look at us, we took down these opposing arguments. We're so smart, right? That means that we're not really taking into account fully opposing perspectives, and sometimes that can make groupthink worse. Second of all, it's important for us to take time to contemplate an issue, right? If you're a group leader, there's a good chance that you will have knowledge or awareness about an issue before other members of the group did. Perhaps your club is having a budget cut, and you know that your club is going to be in harder shape going forward, right? You have that information, but if you present that during the meeting and say, I think we need to cut out this event, people are more willing to sign on because this is the first time that they've heard that your group has a budget cut in the first place, right? People are more willing to go along with the leader and accept their point of view if people in the group have not had the chance to think over the issue as fully. They might have reservations that immediately come to mind. That can create some challenges for the group to be able to be involved. Okay? So it's important for us to give people the time to think through an issue fully. Maybe it's a chance to brainstorm, maybe it's a block, maybe it's sending an agenda or schedule in advance that talks about the issue, or sending an email or update ahead of time before discussion at the meeting. Making sure people have the time to make a decision is really important, right? Oftentimes when we're in groups, we feel a compulsion to have the meetings end as soon as possible, right? Look at us, we got out early, right? That can be a really big drive to be efficient to get things done. But it's a short-term versus long-term gain issue. We get short-term gain, we get the issue done, we get it wrapped up soon, but sometimes it can come back to bite us when we're not able to work effectively later. So taking time to think about an issue and encouraging people to openly express their viewpoints, right? There is no bad opinion. If you are using, like, and I notice this a lot in like professional work settings, people will start to use acronyms and will not really explain what those acronyms or abbreviations are. So if people start talking about, the UHPP deliverables, you don't know what that is, then you're going to be lost. And you might not feel comfortable expressing what is this to the group because you're worried that you might come across as uninformed, right? And by doing that, you become more and more lost. So when it comes time to make a decision, you're more willing to accept leadership because you don't even know what people are even talking about, right? So let people express their views openly, share their thoughts and perspectives. Another thing that you can do effectively as a group leader is you might have an opinion about a topic. Perhaps your group is faced with a budget cut and you have an idea that you need to cut out a certain activity. Cool. But wait to share that. Don't play your cards from the beginning. Give people the chance to share their views and ideas before you as a leader express your own. You're more likely to have a chilling effect where other members of the group don't express their views because they're more interested in going along with what the leader of the group says. So give people the chance to share their views first, and you're going to have a more robust discussion. So I wanted to share a few different case studies that are involved in groupthink, some of the major challenges of groupthink, and some of the perspectives that we can take on in order to deal with it. Right? So there are a lot of really prime examples that we can think about when it comes to groupthink. Perhaps one of the most famous, and the one that really helped to coin the term groupthink, came from the Bay of Pigs invasion during the JFK administration. Right? In this scenario, we had JFK and his administration who were trying to lead a foreign policy effort that was designed to train and utilize forces in Cuba with the effort of ousting and creating change to the regime, right? What we know is that due to a combination of factors, including the plan being ill-conceived, a lack of proper intelligence, and a lack of proper information, right? The entire strategy completely blew up, right? Castro gained significant power and influence, and this was seen as a really major foreign policy blunder, right? A couple others that I would point to include the Challenger space shuttle mission. So this was a case in which we had a space shuttle that was being built and it launched in 1986. In this case, this was formed as a collaboration between a private company and NASA. However, over the construction of the space shuttle, there were significant concerns that came up from this company about the rockets and the ways that the rockets were being tested and developed. There were concerns that the rockets were not functioning properly, had not been properly tested, and were not doing what they needed to do. So there was a lot of pressure to get the shuttle launched as quickly as it could. It was in the context of the Cold War. It was in the context of the space race. So there was a lot of pressure to get it done. What happened? Well, about 57 seconds into the launch, blew up, and I believe it was about 8 astronauts who died inside. And as a result of that, there was a significant suspension of NASA space launch activities. There was also, as you could probably imagine, a lot of bad press, a lot of major economic costs, and so forth. Another example that we could look to are examples of companies that are involved in a lot of issues, including an inability to change and a belief that they're invulnerable, right? If you were to look at the social media activity, including like Facebook and Twitter activity of the company Blockbuster, right, when Netflix was starting to take off and stream and do its services, it's pretty bad in retrospect, right? At the time, Blockbuster was convinced that they were not going to go down, that people were not going to switch to streaming, and when Netflix offered the DVDs that they would send you, that people were not going to do that. They were going to go to their local Blockbuster, right? And what happened? Well, Blockbuster refused to adapt and change. And now we have one Blockbuster left, which is in Bend. And there's a joke. Netflix created a show called Blockbuster that's about this one last remaining Blockbuster. And it got canceled after one season. And the joke is that Netflix effectively canceled Blockbuster twice. So that could be a problem, right? Swiss Air was an airline company that had a similar illusion of invulnerability. It was never going to go down. It was going to remain profitable, and significantly was unsuccessful. We could also look at examples of fast food chains that have not been able to adapt and adjust to changing circumstances or problems, right? One such as Subway immediately come to mind. So I want to share a clip here from the Challenger case that I think does a great job of highlighting some of the issues related to groupthink.
Yet another costly red table all around space shuttle launch delay.
Planning group decisions sometimes result in monumental error. What drives groups to make decisions against their better judgment? Using the story of the Space Shuttle Challenge, this video explored the phenomenon of group thinking, in which group members seek unanimous agreement despite their unintentional doubts.
In 2017, we know something we didn't know before. The primary only can fail completely. The shuttle has flown 19 times and it's come back 19 times. Our job is to run around like chicken little however the sky is falling. It's to keep that shuttle flying.
Dr. James K. Esser identified the 8 symptoms of group thinking.
When more of these symptoms are present, the likelihood is greater that it can occur. Therefore, the probability is higher that any resulting decision will become successful, possibly even catastrophic.
It's time to make a decision. Bob, take off your engineer's hat and put on your management hat.
Does anyone in the loop have a different position?
Even though we have some concern about the low temperature, we now recommend proceeding with the launch.
With this powerful video, viewers will learn how to avoid.
So got some silly, spooky X-Files music, but while it's dramatized, I think it's a good example here of some of the ways that the issues played out and some of the symptoms of groupthink that we noticed, right? People have concerns, but they're unwilling to express them. People have leadership that is pressuring people to move forward, right? It's time to put on our management hats and trying to muscle things through without the opportunity for people to express their reservations or have the space for a discussion. So that can cause significant challenges for a group, right? We've talked about the appeal to tradition, the idea that people will oftentimes do what's been done in the past. And sometimes tradition can be useful and valuable to a group, but if there's an alternative available that allows the group to run more effectively, it's a good idea to consider that, right? So avoiding a mind guard, which is known as like mentally protecting yourself from an outside perspective, like rationalizing, oh, well, I think the temperature will be okay, we'll be safe with this shuttle, right? As a strategy we can use to try to protect ourselves from possible problems. Inviting in outside perspectives, people who disagree with us or have no context or bias or background can be a great way to offer new insights. For example, maybe for your small group observation, you're observing a group that's not run effectively. You have some ideas on things that they could do a bit better, but they have no idea that they have these problems. They might think their group is going great, right? Your outsider perspective can provide knowledge and context that they wouldn't otherwise have. And don't overestimate the expertise of the group, right? People make mistakes, problems happen, so we can't overassume how well the group is going to go. So there are some other ideas that I think are important when we're thinking about creating a strong team and avoiding groupthink, right? In terms of creating people that can work effectively with one another. One of them is the idea of selecting people in your team or group life who are experts in the field, who are people that are knowledgeable and really are able to offer insight to the group. For example, here at EOU in our college, we're developing a new program. It should be a minor in film studies. So we've been able to recruit people who have background and expertise in that topic. Selecting a responsible leader, right? The leader does not necessarily need to be the person who organizes or creates the group, but the person who exemplifies the kinds of traits and qualities that you're looking for in the group. That doesn't necessarily mean that there's somebody that has been a leader in the past. Sometimes people emerge and grow into the role, but who has the qualities that make sense for what the group is designed to do. Finding times to work together, right? So using things like a doodle poll can be a really good way to field people's availability in advance to ensure that people are there. Making sure people know why you're there, right? What are the goals? So again, a lot of people have expressed concern that you're in meetings, you have no idea why you're in the meetings, you just click the link. I'm just here so I don't get fined, right? You don't understand why these meetings are happening. There's not an agenda or explanation for that. Elicit commitment, right? Having people sign on to tasks So an easy way to do this is to maybe have something like a sign-up sheet where perhaps there are 4 tasks you've done and you need 2 people on each task. That can be a really easy way to get people knowing what they need to do, being really clear about responsibilities too. So you might do things, for example, asking people to rank what they want to do in your group in order of preference, having people perhaps fill out a survey in advance about what they have expertise in or what to do, right? That upfront work can really help groups run more effectively. Addressing issues when they come up, right, is important. Promoting accessibility through technology, right? Having opportunities for people to participate through minutes or recording can be really useful. And then providing feedback quickly. If you're running a team or group and you notice somebody's dominating the conversation or is not saying anything, addressing that early on so it doesn't continue to be an issue is an important way to help the group run effectively. So this brings us to some of the different categories that we can think about when it comes to leaders and leadership, right? Again, as you find yourself involved in leadership roles, you might find yourself gravitating toward one of these styles, or you might find over time that you move between them depending on the goals and tasks. You have autocratic leaders, right? Being autocratic is not necessarily a bad thing. If you have somebody like a coach or a leader for your group, and they need to run certain things like budgeting, like lodging at hotels, like getting you meals, and like getting all of the nuts and bolts together, like the rental vehicles for travel, right? Sometimes it can be good to have somebody that's taking on those responsibilities for themselves and making a lot of those more difficult decisions, right? It's useful when it helps the group work effectively and is generally non-controversial. It's not so great if people find themselves not included in the process, right? When I was involved at the University of Utah, some of the students got mad because we'd always stay at like a Holiday Inn Express. And we're like, well, why are we staying there? Why can't we stay somewhere nicer, right? Well, because we've got a budget. Laissez-faire leaders are hands-off in their approach, right? There are people who generally allow others to kind of create and dictate their rules and involvement. Generally speaking, this is not a great practice, right? You might think about it as like a mentor or teacher or advisor, but you've like never met them. So that can be people who are not really involved, but it can be good to take a step back and allow people in the group to work together rather than micromanage. A leader is a technician, right? That's somebody who is able to offer specific skills. So perhaps you have somebody who's coming in from like an IT or technology department to talk to you about managing the issue. There are a lot of groups that might have somebody who's providing a training, such as a training about diversity, right? People who are coming in and bringing expertise on a topic are people who take on that technician role. We're not leaders for the whole group at all moments, but might be leaders in addressing a specific issue. A leader is a conductor, right? You might think about it as like a maestro who's bringing people together or is harmonizing them. One example here of a leader as a conductor, right, is like Nick Fury in the Marvel universe, right? Like he's the one who unites and creates the Avengers, right? The person who is creating the group and helping people be brought together and understand one another, building bridges, that's the leader as conductor. And then lastly, we have a leader as a coach, who is somebody who's a mentor and a teacher, who's offering direct feedback, opportunity for improvement, who's very involved in providing that kind of one-to-one response to people as they're working through different issues. So all different types of ways that people can be leaders in moments and situations. Leadership traits, right? Things that work well is educating and orienting toward issues. Do you know what you're talking about? Do you know how to guide people, or can you build the skill set that allows you to understand the issue? Nurturing and encouragement. Can you give the opportunity for the group to feel supported, to feel backed up in what they're trying to achieve, right? Those are things that are really important. Assessment and correction. If there's issues going wrong, can you diagnose and help the group run more smoothly? If your study group is not having much more success, maybe there's another way you can study for a different exam that's coming up. Listening and counseling. Are you available? Are you there? It's important to draw a line, right? Because there's a good chance that you are not a qualified mental health expert. Doesn't mean you don't want to support people and offer people the help that they need, but to instead direct people to resources, right? It's like I will say if, there is ever a request for advice in that way, I'm not that kind of doctor, right? Providing that opportunity for advice up into the professional limit is important. And helping the group stay on task, right? Allowing the group to focus on the key issues or topics that they need to address is important. There's also the idea of transactional leadership, right? So this, if you are familiar with Pavlov's dog, or you're familiar with Skinner, the Skinner box, right? Behaviorist and kind of classical conditioning are practices that have been developed to understand behavior, right? So Pavlov's dog is the idea that if you ring a bell and then give a dog a treat, eventually over time, right, the dog will salivate when they hear the bell because they've associated it with the treat, right? Or you have the dog do tricks like they sit. My dog likes to like paw over and over again. She thinks that if she shakes, she'll get more treats. So doing something for a reward, right, is a behaviorist approach. Or, right, if you're a rat in the box, you push the button and you get a treat, right? So you keep pushing the button. So this is the idea of transactional leadership, that perhaps you motivate people in the group because they will get something for performing well. Maybe they get a bonus, maybe they get a raise, maybe they get a promotion, right? They get something for them as a result of their work. So this is the idea very much in a theory X orientation toward how people behave and are motivated in group settings. So for today, I have a scenario here. We have Brianna, who is an EOU student who is interested in developing a robotics team on campus, but she's concerned about making that team go well. And what I'd like your group to develop and think about here is a plan. First of all, what can she do to avoid groupthink? Of the categories that we've talked about, some of the different types of leaders, like leader as technician, laissez-faire leader, what type of leader should she be? And what types of traits of leadership do you think that she should exhibit? So I will have the Zoom folks together in a breakout room. I'll create a breakout room for you all. And then we will do a group of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then we'll do a group here of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So take some time to discuss with members in your group. Have one person who will write or type your response to these questions with your names on it, and we'll talk about them together in just a little bit.
Yes, I right. How can they avoid groupthink? All right, so step one, obviously, you can have like the devil's advocate guy over the counter and people, and just making sure, you know, you got someone on the other side of things all the time.
Make sure everyone gets the focus and then call the session for people that
Yeah, allow it, if he needs to be heard, like that, and don't be too judgmental about it and stuff, be like, well, that's what that takes. Basically, right, just open up all. You'd like to be one of the let's just go through that fantastic.
And also say that maybe it's some.
She'd like to hire one.
Yeah. It would either be like either like grading specific like skills.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Let me make sure I get everything. So. Yeah, sorry, I'm terrible. I feel like I know I've been in the same group with you several times, mostly, but this is, I'm sorry. All right, so yeah, go, okay, double tap, yeah, allow people to speak up on their speaker, ask opening questions, so get their.
Some different research. Like have a lot of different things they have to like.
Okay. Okay, what kind of, that's actually be why. Okay, so. Robotics.
There was also one, I couldn't do it for that, but it was like. Task or something like that. Yeah, earlier in the day. Like that might be helpful since it's like specifically like robotics, like I feel like Brianna or whatever, like when she's creative, she probably. Like the conductor, yeah.
So, all right, I was responsible between theater style conductor and
I feel like why really she's. For robotics. It's not something you can just do. It's not why.
We'll give your groups a little bit more time here and then ask us to discuss together.
So what you can see the shape. Me or something?
So, yeah, so leadership traits that Brianna should improve it. Yeah, okay, encouragement, morale. Yeah.
Well, I would have gone to.
Sunlight groups are just about done here. So let's have a chance for folks to share some of their thoughts with regard to what they can do for this scenario. Let's start with this group on this side. What were the things you came up with to help out Brianna here?
So for number one, we've had to get assigned specific roles, like kind of like a double advocate role, like that different opinions and stuff. And then if Brianna is leader, she can share, kind of lead or share, laugh, and allow her to discuss for herself. So then she can like fill off of ideas.
Yep.
Number two, we said Brianna should be a leader as a conductor or technician, and she brings specific skills to the group, but offers advice with the same level of authority. And then for number three, as long as she like shows support and encouraging, she can help like increase the group activity, and then also like make sure everyone's on task at hand. We can kind of things done with like pretty technical and a
Yeah. So one advantage, right, is if you have somebody that you openly share to the group is going to play devil's advocate before the meeting even starts, that person is kind of privileged and is enabled to openly express their disagreement to the group, right? You have created a setting for that person to openly express and share their points. You might want to make sure that other people know that they can do that too, but that's an invitation to having more democratic participation and addressing some of the problems that can come up in a group setting. And how about here on this side?
Yeah, so for the first part, we had a very similar one where, okay, first off, we wanted that the groups encouraged to speak up, have their opinions heard and stuff. Ask open-ended questions instead of like yes and no, like do you support the motion or not, let them get their thoughts in on it a little. Like you were saying the other day. Assign different like research topics to people, so they maybe, you know, a couple to the same one, so they come out with a little different perspectives.
Yeah.
And, you know, you're not relying too much on one guy's perception of things that are coloring the whole meeting or something. Because if you have one guy doing like everything, all the work or research or whatnot, you're going to end up with a biased view, even if
Yeah.
you know, fairly impartial. Ensure that someone is playing devil's advocate and running counter to the majority.
Yeah.
And then the leadership style we went for is a hybrid between conductor and technician, probably, because robotics, you're going to need specialization and background in that. And that's kind of what she's at, because I mean, if she's putting together a college robotics team, she's obviously involved in that. But you're also going to need coordination to run the club and stuff. So the conductor's kind of a useful thing as well as the actual skill.
Yeah.
The leadership traits we went for were supportive, encouraging, you know, kind of keep morale up, because these are your peers, you know, they don't lose anything by leaving the club or anything. So you kind of got to be nice. You want people to be dedicated, so trying to like drum that up and lead by example like that, and making sure that everyone is kind of involved and on task.
Yeah. Great. So you all have a lot here that I think really helps us to understand the dynamics of group settings, right? So I like the kind of hybrid style that you're suggesting for leadership. I also like this point here about having people investigate and address groupthink by like taking on different roles or looking at it from different perspectives, right? So one way to think about this is that the point of view or experience you're coming into might mean you have very different answers to something, right? So if we're having like a roundtable discussion or a group of people talking about an issue, what does it mean to come into that topic from psychology? What does it mean to come in from economics? What does it mean to come in from communication, right? The idea being that the experience that you're coming into for an issue is very different depending upon the person that you're involved in. Or the issue that you're involved in and the experience that has with it, right? So we might have different points that come from the particular concerns we're bringing to the table. If we're really concerned about finances and economics, we might have a very different position than somebody who's a lot more creatively oriented, who has a lot of ideas that might be expensive. So recognizing that assigning different kind of frameworks for how group members think about an issue helps us to have a greater diversity of perspectives. So to wrap up for today, we had the chance to talk about the importance of leadership in addressing groupthink and opening perspectives and opinions to allow the group to work effectively and facilitating the ability of a group to manage a good team. And then next week, We'll be talking about group motivation. What can inspire and spark groups to work well together? And how can we do the qualities in groups that we need? So for Zoom folks, I'll just ask that you email your prompt, since I know not everybody was able to join for that day. And then for groups in class, email or pass forward your prompts for the day. Have a good, safe weekend, and I will see you all again next week.